Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators. I'm Anthony Renault. This week we are speaking with Democratic State Representative Joanne Ferrary about legislation she is working on during this legislative session. Representative Ferrary, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you join us. Of course, this is a busy legislative session. The pandemic has impacted New Mexico so much. I want to talk with you a little bit about that briefly here as we start. Many folks have contributed and participated during these sessions that have been online, the committee sessions that have been held mostly online. The leadership in the New Mexico House from the Democratic side released some information that said over 6,100 New Mexicans from almost every county have participated in committee meetings this month alone. Over 32,600 people have watched the legislature online at the website. Your thoughts on participation from residents in New Mexico so far during this legislative session?
I think it's amazing that so many people are able to access making public comment, listening in. Our committees are organized where we can have polls and see who in the audience and watching can say if they support or they oppose a different issue or bill, and then to take public comment from people from all over the state has really been amazing to give a voice to everyone. Unfortunately, there's still those who don't have broadband and won't be able to participate, but we're hoping that more and more people will be able to, even in the last month of this session, be able to give comment and let us know how they feel about a different bill. So I think it's been great. We are able to make sure that people are heard, that they can weigh in on the issue, and that we hear them.
Now, you mentioned broadband, and of course, New Mexico is no stranger to the digital divide. Do you think this legislative session and these numbers about finding out how many people are participating is going to make an impact on how lawmakers take action in funding more broadband in the state?
Oh, most definitely. With the pandemic, it's been even more obvious, with kids trying to gain access to virtual classrooms and people doing telehealth, and even, with our legislature, we need to make sure that we can expand and have broadband access to the internet for everyone. It even helps businesses and people to be able to, order things over the internet. It helps business, and it helps the economy. It helps our students. It helps, even with telehealth. It's really important that we make sure that we expand and have internet everywhere in our state.
Okay, I want to move on and talk about some legislation that you're sponsoring. One is House Bill 7, the bill to repeal the abortion ban in New Mexico. The state Senate has already passed a version of this bill, Senate Bill 10. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this bill and why you feel it was necessary to be passed in New Mexico.
Well, it's been important for the past few years, especially with the past presidential administration, because of the appointments of the Supreme Court justices being more conservative and the threat of Roe v. Wade falling or being reduced. And so we have been trying for the past 3 or 4 years to pass this bill, and all it does is nothing changes. It stays the same. We're just repealing 3 sections that would make it so that we didn't have safe and legal abortion in New Mexico. And this is important to respect the decisions of women for their full health care and for the healthcare providers not to be criminalized. And this is something that I think has been critical and very important to a lot of people, constituents, legislators in our state.
This bill, the last time we talked on your legislators, I believe it was a couple of years ago, this bill actually failed in the legislative session. It failed in the Senate. What do you think the difference was this time with the Senate passing it?
Well, with that, with those votes that were taken in the Senate, it identified the senators who were in opposition, and especially the Democratic senators. And so we had lots of women who rallied around different primary candidates, and to win those seats eventually, even in the regular general election.
Now, I want to talk with you a little bit more about that political fallout. I talked with candidates in the Democratic primary who were running, and many brought up this issue. So do you think it was this bill that really inspired some people to run for office?
Oh, most definitely. It was great how women stepped up to run for these offices in the Senate and in the House, and to use making sure that women had full health care and abortion as part of that health care, and access for safe and legal. We didn't want to go back to the days before Roe v. Wade. And if that changes at the Supreme Court level, we want to make sure that New Mexico is able to still provide the same, abortion care if needed.
Of course.
So, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I found that interesting. You said nothing changed in New Mexico with this issue, but some may say that it was this piece of legislation that changed the New Mexico Senate. Do you think that's the case?
Oh, yes, most definitely. What I mean is, if this bill passes, nothing will change in New Mexico. It will stay the same. We're just, making sure that we show the protection and the respect to women and to the healthcare providers. But yes, most definitely, it was a political issue during the primary and the general election. Because it's that important to women and the men who love and care about their family and their situation.
Can you kind of share a little bit more about this legislation and how you think it could make a difference with public health in New Mexico?
Well, public health in New Mexico, I'm on that vice chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, and it's just part of the whole healthcare provision for women.
There's also a lot of research out there that compares how restrictive abortion laws in other countries, and even before Roe v. Wade was instituted, how it impacts health. Can you kind of share with us a little bit more about that, and was that also part of the reason why you wanted to implement this law?
Well, yes, it is important that, if the life of the mother or something happening later in the pregnancy, that the healthcare provider and the woman can make those kinds of decisions, and have it safe, and make sure that it's available for, and something that can come up really quickly. And we need to make sure that the health of the woman is, taken care of.
Okay, now there's just about 30 seconds left to talk about this topic, but I want to ask you, do you think there could be any potential lawsuits if this bill passed, or if it doesn't?
Um, I'm not sure. I know because nothing is really going to change that there shouldn't be any lawsuits.
Representative Ferrari, I want to talk with you about a major issue in New Mexico, and that is hunger. We know that over 315,900 people in the state are dealing with food insecurity. 114,000 of them are children. That's according to data from Feeding America. Now, the organization has also done projections. The organization has also done projections on how the pandemic has impacted New Mexico. Nearly 27% of people in Luna County are projected to be food insecure. Sierra County, nearly 26%. And the rest of the counties in our viewing area are around 18 to 19% food insecure. That includes Doña Ana County, county which you serve and live in. Now, I want to talk with you about hunger because you're working on legislation to assist food banks who have been overwhelmed during this pandemic. What can you tell us about the legislation that you're working on?
Sure. The Emergency Hunger Relief Bill will add $5 million to go to the Food Bank Association, who have a great distribution throughout the state. Roadrunner Food Bank helps share food to pantries and like Casa de Peregrinos here in Las Cruces and others through southern New Mexico. So we infused $5 million during the special session in November, and that will hold us or help the food banks until April. But from April to the end of the year, we're going to have a need for another 5 million. So we're working to support that and make sure we get the funding for that. But also then we have hunger going on at the colleges that we're asking for $100,000 for a pilot program that will give higher ed a chance to have coordinators in different universities or colleges that want to apply for this funding. And that coordinator can then help resolve some of the problems on their own campuses. If they need help with pantries, if they need help with vouchers that could be given out on an emergency basis, or how to have extra food on campus restaurants, made available for students. So that's another idea. But the main part of what we've been working on for at least the past year and a half has been a work group or council of hunger, food, and agricultural groups to come together.
Yeah, that seems like something that hasn't really been tried here in the state before, because when the pandemic hit, it really brought a lot of attention to how our food gets to us, how our food is produced, and how it gets to us. And we saw obviously delays with that when supermarkets were empty at the start of the pandemic. So tell us about what you're working on to bring all of these things together. I believe, what is it, the Food, Hunger, and Farm Act?
Yes, exactly. It's House Bill 207, and all of the things that the work group has brought together, and they're just weekly discussions and in subgroups. How do we bring and reduce the barriers from good, nutritious food coming from the farms, going to senior centers and to schools, how to improve senior discounts when they go to the farmers market, how to make sure that we have cold storage that can be shared from the food banks when they're shipping around the state, or even with small farmers that they could even use that, possibly the cold storage. So what we're trying to do is bring all of the state agencies together that are part of this whole system and what they can do, as well as working with the farmers, the ranchers, the schools, all of the stakeholders, to bring them together and to make this so this was a group and a coordination that won't last just for this administration, but will continue on. And that's why we're looking to set this up.
You bring up an interesting point. We see so many changes, it seems like, when administrations change, but they're not sustainable. So how is this going to be sustainable by setting up something like this?
Well, it'll be in statute and it will be funded. I think we're asking 270 or 285,000 to get this started. It will give the people who have to travel to go to these meetings mileage per diem. State agencies will already be covered, but it's just to ensure that we address this, and it's possible. The people who've been working on this were wonderful. They've talked about healthy soil, how to improve different growing initiatives. So I really am excited about this for New Mexico, so that we can make sure that there's no reason that even one child goes hungry and can't go to school with all of the brain power that they need.
Now, with this issue, I've spoken with Roadrunner Food Bank throughout the pandemic, and they work with partner agencies throughout the state, other food pantries throughout the state. The pandemic has impacted many of these food pantries throughout the state that are in smaller rural communities. Some have went under. So how can folks pay more attention to this issue? Do you think the legislation is going to help those rural communities as well that maybe have lost a food pantry?
Well, the $5 million will help get food to those pantries, but they still need local support. Even Roadrunner Food Bank depends a lot on fundraising and donors to help. But at the legislature, we do try to have capital outlay like we did, I think it was in 2019 or 20, that got them more trucks so that they could, go throughout the state and supply. But it does take cooperation from the local communities to help support the sustainability of those pantries. And then we try to help infuse getting the food to them to distribute.
I know another issue that they had discussed was that they had a lot of questions on how are volunteers going to help during a pandemic when people are concerned about COVID-19 and being exposed to that. So do you see this continuing to play a role with this issue?
Well, I know that funds had to be expended for hiring people when you can't rely on volunteers, because a lot of us as seniors and retirees, had to step back until we can get more people vaccinated. And so they were having to spend more money to have to hire people to help, unpack the food and to, help distribute the food.
Okay, I want to move on and talk about another issue in New Mexico that's been going on for some time, and that is guardianship issues. You're working on legislation to establish a decision-making task force in New Mexico. Can you share with us about this legislation and how you think it could address the issue?
Sure. When they had the guardianship reform legislation a couple years ago, there wasn't enough time to establish a step that's really important called the supported decision making. And that step would make it so that a person doesn't have to go into full guardianship under of a guardian ad litem or a conservator. And so that is important that we get a task force to address that. It's not just something you can come in and say, this is how we're going to legislate and this is how it's going to be. We have to go back and bring together the different people from the courts and the guardianship program to see how we would be able to supply. And a lot of times they're volunteers. Mm. And then we also have a bill that is going to, we have certifications for guardians and conservators, but we don't have a licensing process. And with this licensing process, we'll be able to also have where their license can be revoked or, recommended to the court, that this happens. And so this bill is going to be really important to the families who have not agreed or have been overlooked in their part of helping their loved one. And so there have been a lot of injustices that have happened in our state. And ever since I've been, for the past 4 years, been working with families that have been affected by this. And it's not just here in Las Cruces, it's, throughout the state too. And they're more court appointed than they are state. There's a guardianship program that the state has for more of people with disabilities. And that's under the Disabilities Planning Council. And that is under the Human Services Department.
Now, do you think this is going to help provide some oversight on an issue? You brought up, just one part of guardianship, and we've seen some cases where there's been some neglect, obviously, within the court system with that issue. I know the Albuquerque Journal did an investigation last year into 20,000 cases, and there was around 2,300 ongoing cases that were labeled closed, even though the incapacitated person was still alive, and they were just, so do you think that legislation and more oversight could help provide and prevent instances, like mistreatment or losing case files from happening?
Sure, yes. And we need those extra funds to help that department to be able to, expand, to have more FTEs, who can help with that oversight too. So yes, having the licensure and the certification, but the licensure is what we're increasing or, imposing. And that will then be able to make it so that Office of Guardianship can make recommendations to the court or let them know that they're revoking their license. And then the courts will then have to follow up with getting new guardians, or maybe making a decision that should have been made in the first place of, giving a family member, that important role that so many people would like to take up.
I mean, this, as anyone who has experienced having to take care of a loved one, there's a lot of extra costs that may come along with that. There's also a lot of mental health issues that may arise dealing with something like that. Is this legislation and possibly this task force going to be able to look at that as well?
Well, if you're talking about the supported decision making, yes, it will make it so that things that family members, maybe if they're out of town, they need help with someone just being there to help them make decisions about paying their bills or help, with a few financial things, then that's what, the supported decision making will be different than the guardianship level. It's like one step down from the guardianship.
I see. I want to talk with you. We just have a couple of minutes left, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on an issue. You've been serving in the legislature for some time now. There's been some calls to relook how the legislature conducts its business. We have obviously a 60-day session, a 30-day session, and state lawmakers are not paid. They do get per diem, of course, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on what do you feel on the issue of potentially reassessing how the New Mexico legislature is set up and meets? And also, do you favor paying state lawmakers? Do you think that can make an impact on how and who decides to run?
That's a really good question. I really do support paying legislators, even though we get per diem when we are, in session, and then if we attend interim committees, that helps. But there's so many young people with great potential to be legislators that aren't able to take this job because they can't afford, to take leave from their current job, or other circumstances. Even going to Santa Fe, as we usually do, it's very expensive. And so I think it's important that we do pay legislators, because it's not just during those committee meetings. We're working all the time, helping constituents with different things, especially during COVID, how to get PPE, how to get unemployment, and all the different things that we've had occur, getting small businesses, helping them get the loans. So I think that's really important. And to look at going longer. Some people say, well, 60 days is enough, but if we didn't have to have everything happen so quickly and so intensely, and could do it over a longer period of time, I think it might be something that New Mexico should look at.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank you so much, State Representative Ferrary, for joining us for your legislators.
Thank you. I really appreciate, and wish us luck on the rest of the half of the session.
Okay, will do. And we want to thank you for joining us for the program. I'm Anthony Morneau. We'll see you next time.